Alright, hello everyone and welcome to the retro view here of my Axial Ax10 Scorpion. This is going to be just basically a build breakdown on the truck, but if you want to see my build thread, I will link it down below in the description. So, let's get into it. On the outside, first things first, you're going to see it has Hot Bodies Rovers. These are the white dot version, and they are still rocking their original kind of overstuff, understuff inserts. And they are mounted on just some Amazon, basically like 5-spoke, deep dish, -10 aluminum beadlock. As far as the body goes, as you can obviously see, it's a ARTR version XC1 body. This would have came out in about 08. This truck originally is actually a B17 Betty Scorpion. And the way you can tell that is on the Scorpion the kit, the original. They had front knuckles in the rear as well, and they had small link lockouts. So they still had dog bones, so they could be easily turned to four-wheel steering. But they were known to kind of wobble and have horrible alignment, so this was a popular upgrade, which actually started to come later on the standard on the later trucks. So, yeah, that being said, it is an original B17, but I've kind of modeled it after the later ARTR, hence the orange body. The body I found new online. It's a takeoff from that time period that was never used. I gave it the comp cut, took the fender flares off the front and the rear. So that's about it for cosmetics. Let's have a look underneath this guy. This is where you're going to start to see some changes from the regular Scorpion. These trucks from the factory came with the links actually outside the chassis, and they came down and mounted to the outside of this dual shear mount here. So a popular mod for the time was called inboarding the links, which is where you bring them into the skid. And the reason for this was it would pull them out the offside of the chassis, so there's less things to hang up on, but it would angle them in further, which would give you better triangulation, and it would give you better steering angle, because before, when they're outside, you start to steer, your tire would get into them really easily. So this truck has the inboarded mod, but it's kind of done modernly, I guess you could say. It's just a 3D printed skid, which I sanded off to kind of get rid of that awful 3D print texture. What guys did in the day was they would take the stock skid and trim out a notch here, mount the link inside that, or you could get the TCS Crawlers dual triangulation skid, it was called, and that mounted them in even further, which I believe is kind of a probably similar geometry to what this is. And the other thing you seen was guys would make their own kind of Delrin skids as well, which was really popular. The other thing you might notice, it's a little hard to see from here, we'll see it more when the body's off, but these trucks were all 3-link from the factory, and this is now triangulated 4-link on the upper, front, and rear. So, let's move to the front here. The front axle kind of has some interesting stuff going on. I think it's not something you'd commonly see on an AX10. So it's still a factory width AX10 axle, but it's using AR44 parts. It's got the aluminum C-hubs here are for an AR44, and the knuckles are brass, also for AR44. And then it's using OEM Axial AR44 universal joints in there. So it gets rid of the dog bone, gives you much better steering angle, and gives you smoothness in your steering as well. You also gain, it's kind of hard to tell, but you gain 8 degrees of kingpin inclination, whereas the factory setup is 0 degree. So this was a popular mod in the day. Vanquish used to make a set of C's and knuckles that had that 8 degree inclination. But when you go to the AR44 style, you already have that there. The only thing you really need to buy to achieve this, I mean, other than the AR44 parts, is this does have aluminum beef tubes inside the housing. So the beef tube's mounted through the housing through this black screw, and then you get to screw your C-hub right into the beef tube with that screw right there. So that adds a ton of strength and then allows you to clock the C-hub. The other nice thing about going AR44 is it's a high steer style knuckle. so it puts your main drag link actually higher up on the pumpkin than it normally would be, so you can increase that angle. Now, if you're not familiar with these trucks stock, they probably have about that much angle, not even exaggerating. They're pretty pathetic. But with these mods, you can actually get what I would consider to be a modern amount of steering angle, which is pretty nice. There's a few other things you have to do to be able to utilize that steering angle. So let me pop off the body and we'll have a look under there. Okay, so with great steering angle comes great bindage. Basically, if you don't move the links or the shocks, you can see the tires would be going straight into them. So to achieve that on this truck, as I kind of showed you here with the inboarding of the links here, they've also been inboarded on the axle end. They're mounted inside that double shear, so they're just single shear mounted now. And then they have this piece here, which is called a shock raiser. Mounts to the top of the housing and then goes down to the double shear for strength, but it gives you this upper shock mount. So that allows you to mount your shock further in, and it also allows you to gain angle this way to help lower the CG of the truck or adjust spring rate if that's something you need to do. Those are made by Vanquish. They're discontinued now. You can still kind of find them on eBay or here or there. I've sourced a few pairs, but I'll be keeping them for future projects. So, what else we got here? I guess we're talking about suspension. We'll keep talking about that. The shocks on this truck are actually Coyote takeoffs. So the original Ax10 kit had 120 mil shocks, I believe it is, which are quite massive. So the truck originally stands up like the top of the chassis, probably up here, like very high center of gravity. Lots of clearance, of course, but definitely tippy. So these are, I think, about a 98 mil shock eye to eye, so lowers that 20 mils right away. And then you have a lot nicer spring rate options with these little guys, so you can kind of get that dialed in. Oh, this is, sorry, my cat, Dirty Mike. He just had dental work and he's a little high. Okay, other things. The chassis is original to the truck. Just a carbon fiber plate up here. Mostly just for looks, I guess. Maybe lose a little bit of sprung weight. So we talked earlier about the triangulated 4-link. Up front, the truck's running a TCS crawlers bracket, which extends out behind the servo to give you the 4-link mounts. And then in the back here, this is just a modified STRC electronics tray that was just cut down and drilled to do the exact same purpose, allowing it to be properly 4-linked. We got some STRC body mounts on here, and yeah, just the original orange bracketry and washers to match. So the other kind of period correct mod on this truck, but is done in a more modern way, is dig. Now, dig was pretty much necessary back then because these trucks had such poor steering angle. It was kind of the only way you could get them to turn. Now, the reason I say it's modern is just because this is just a clone, like Amazon dig box. Just super cheap, super basic. Basically a ripoff of the Vanquish Hertz dig, which was what a lot of guys ran back then, I guess, if you had money. If you didn't have money, the DNA dig kit, which would go on the stock housing, was a little more affordable. The only other difference here, if I can get a good angle on it, it's just running an Endura micro servo to power the dig there. I guess while we're on the topic of electronics, the truck is running just a Fusion 1800, and with the way I have it geared, it's actually, well, it's using a Vanquish, I don't know if we can see that, yeah, we can kind of see it. It's got no slipper clutch, and it's got a Vanquish 56 tooth, 32 pitch spur gear. But on the topic of gearing, one thing you can't see, but inside here the gears and lockers have actually been changed. These trucks came with pot metal gears from the factory, and I think it was a 38-13 ring and pinion. This has been converted over to a 43-13, which takes you from a 292 final drive ratio in your axle to a 3.307. So I did that front and back, so the truck doesn't actually have any like torque split. Net underdrive is still 0, but I did that just to gain gear reduction because these trucks don't really have a lot of it to start with. So I did that, and at the same time I put the Incision hardened steel lockers front and rear just for durability. And then the only other thing in the drivetrain that you guys are looking at there is probably the Mias drive shafts, and that pretty much rounds out the truck. So yeah, I'm going to plan to do more of these retro views on some of my vintage crawlers. Any questions on the rig or in general, hit me up in the comments below. Thanks for watching.